Great. So welcome, everyone. This is Bill at the ServiceRocket Media Studios in Palo Alto, California. And see, it's official, Mikey.
Yeah.
Joining me today is the co-author of the fourth update of the Practical JIRA Administration book. You contributed to this book, Mikey, with Matt Doar, and this book is on its fourth update, as I understand. Yeah. Okay. So it was first published in 2011. So that's about 4 updates so far.
Yeah. Which like. I had nothing to do with it then. I'm a new feature.
You are such a software guy. You are a new feature.
I'm in the release notes for 4.0.
Are you telling me there's release notes for this book?
It was made in a Git-like tool. It probably has release notes.
I think Matt said it was made in GitHub, or at least a tool like it.
Yeah, it's formatted in XML. It seemed like the geekiest way to assemble a book. But Matt handled that side of it. I just had to pass off the text.
Yeah, what's Microsoft Word? Okay. Well, Mikey, what I wanted to do was spend 20 minutes or so. I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about what got you interested, why you wanted to do this when you could have been doing lots of things with your time, and the topic you contributed to the book, which I think is an interesting one, and I think it was added for a reason. That it's a confusing subject for people, and I think you wanted to clarify that, but we'll get into that. How does that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So first question, Mikey, how did you get involved in contributing to this book?
Yeah, it was part luck, right place, right time. If you happen to be working with Matt Doar and he liked you somewhat, that kind of situation. But yeah, Matt basically said he was planning to do an update and said, I appreciate your technical contributions to our weekly tech talks that we've had. And Are you interested in writing a chapter?
Okay.
That's it. I was totally on board with that.
That's cool. And Mikey, you have contributed several blog posts to the ServiceRocket blog, and Matt always seemed to have nice things to say about the content of those. So I think you were probably on his radar, huh?
Yeah, I cut my teeth in the blogosphere, as it is, and those seem to be well received. Yeah. So,
and I think you make a splash, because maybe another episode we'll talk about your use of hot dog metaphors and workflow transitions. Yeah.
That one was a good one. I'm still partial to using JIRA to track different ways of shipping things in, I forget what century I chose, 14th, 13th century Europe. I thought that was a good one.
And what were you shipping? Was it wheat?
Ivory was in there.
And maidens? All right.
I don't think so. Maybe in an update of that blog.
So you said when Matt asked you, you were on board. So what was it that inspired you to want to do this? Because writing a book, or even part of a book, that's a lot of work.
Street cred. Mad street cred.
Mad street cred.
Yeah, I basically just have to walk through any neighborhood with this book, and they're like, "Oh, that guy's a serious JIRA consultant there. Well, he's got his name on a book."
Well, certain neighborhoods, I imagine. So let's talk about that, the neighborhoods in which you roll. So what's a typical day for you? Because you obviously do consulting work on JIRA projects. So tell the audience a typical day for you that'll set up street cred for why you wrote the part of the book.
Yeah, most days of the week I work as a consultant for ServiceRocket, and that means going into a company, figuring out what their processes are and how to get them into JIRA, or to look at how they're using JIRA and tell them how they can do it better. So anytime that you come in, they're always hesitant. They say, they've got a consultant in, but does this guy know what he's talking about?
Yep.
And I figured it would be a lot easier if I could just point to a book and be like, well, O'Reilly seems to think this is okay.
So are you telling me that next time, every time you go into a client office, you're just going to like just walk around with this book in your hand? And
well, I that seems inefficient, so I figure maybe I'll just start sewing it into my shirts.
I see. But I wouldn't suggest sewing that over the Rocket logo on your t-shirt.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to Rob about where it's appropriate to sew into a Rocket shirt.
Yes, and so you do consulting work on JIRA projects, but you also conduct training courses. I mean, isn't that where you are now? Where are you?
Boston, Massachusetts, technically Waltham, Massachusetts. Yep. And if you want to get really technical, I'm at the Hilton Garden Inn.
In Waltham, Mass?
Yeah, and I'm doing a training class tomorrow on JIRA Administrators and JIRA Agile. And that's really another reason that I wanted to contribute to the book is I find it much more interesting to do something different, maybe not every day, but just to do a range of things. I don't like to get stuck in one particular niche.
Yeah.
So writing's an interesting approach to a technical subject, and it's challenging in a whole different way.
That's very good because if you, in that sense, you're doing consulting work and you go from client to client, so all those are different. You also fly to Boston and New York and all over the world conducting training courses for people who want to learn JIRA, and then writing a book. So it looks like you have some variety in your day.
Yeah, I try to.
So, Mikey, what was the topic, for those that don't know, the topic that you contributed to the book? It's a whole new topic, right?
It's a much more in-depth look at a topic.
Okay.
It was definitely included in the book before in some way, but it was more of a cursory look at it. So the subject is managing custom fields. I wrote a riveting chapter on managing custom fields.
Riveting.
And it was an area that I felt like there was a lot of depth there. And since I work as a consultant and I get to see how people are using JIRA and how people are, what mistakes people are making, it was an area where I'd seen plenty of people make a lot of mistakes. And it's one where on the surface, it seems very simple.
Yeah, just change the value of a field. How hard is that? I could do that.
Right. Like, I need to count how many bananas there are in this issue. I'm just going to make a field, how many bananas, and move on.
Yeah.
And but there are a lot of different features that come into play with managing custom fields, and a lot of impacts that are really not obvious.
Yes.
And that's the great thing about Matt's book, is that it's mostly focused on these problem areas that you wouldn't necessarily know if you just read through the documentation and just learn JIRA at a very basic level. We sort of look at the documentation is a great place to get a full overview of everything that JIRA can do. The book is more about helping administrators learn where they can potentially make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's good for a new administrator to go through and say, hey, whoa, I see what that does there.
Yep.
I'll try not to do that. Because we've all learned the hard way.
We have. That's what I like about books, because I talked to Matt on a webinar this week. We talked about why a book, and because we could write blog posts, you guys could, write articles and update There's any number of ways you can get information out there. But it sounds like you're also using your experience and kind of curating mistakes and helping people understand them before they make them and to try to prevent them. And you're sort of consolidating all this in the package in a book.
Yeah, that was the way that I looked at it when I was writing the chapter. So what would I have wanted to know when I started out?
Okay, so it sounds like this topic was inspired by your interaction with customers and users of JIRA and how they could be using custom fields better.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I found this particular topic interesting. I don't know. I think it was because of the variety of tools that you can use to manage custom fields. So without getting in too deep, you've got screens, which you can use to manage custom fields in a way. You've got field configurations, which you can use to manage custom fields in a way, and then you've got field contexts. And so it becomes this complex problem where you have multiple ways of doing the same thing in the tool.
Yep.
And so which one is the correct one to use for the correct situation? And what are the impacts of doing it each way?
I see. So what is is there a number one thing people are doing that they need to stop doing if they only understood these complexities? I mean, what's the one, if there's one thing, what are you trying to address in this chapter to get people to, no, do it this way. You're going to be in trouble later if you do it that way.
Well, there's a list of do's and don'ts at the end of the chapter, and the biggest don't that sticks out is don't name two custom fields the same thing.
That seems so obvious sitting here. I mean, I laugh. I'm not a JIRA administrator, but I laugh thinking that's silly. But obviously, that's common enough, worth noting.
Yeah, there are business cases where it makes sense, and it's basically you've got this field and it means this in one area. So if we're saying. I'll go with the example that I gave in the book. So I had a field called horses, and maybe horses is naming different breeds of horse, but maybe in another project you want it to mean different actual horses. If you're trying to say what's the lineup for this week's race, which horses are running, and so if you don't know about context, you wouldn't know that you can do that with one field. So it's, you could very easily say, well, I'll just make two fields and with the same name for different purposes, and that would work. But there are some drawbacks that you'll get yourself into trouble down the road.
Is that what makes it confusing? And that's where the three different elements of these fields come in: the screens and the configuration, and the third one escapes me. Is that where those come in?
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is that the confusion comes just from the fact that there are three different configuration elements, I'll call them, that can be used to control fields in some way. And so it's, what features are controlled with which configuration element. So that's one part of the confusion. And then the one area where they all overlap is in hiding fields. So every single one of them can be used to hide fields. So if you want to hide a field in JIRA, which one is the correct one to use? And they're all valid for different situations.
I see. What is the most common question you get on these customer engagements when you start talking about custom fields?
The most common question that I usually get is, why can't I have a new custom field?
What do you mean? It's custom.
Because another issue with it's this trade-off. So custom fields, they're obviously very core to what you can do in JIRA. JIRA is a great tool for customizing how you do your work, what kind of metrics you can track with it. But there's this performance trade-off. And just as of, I don't know exactly when they put it out, but in the latest version of the JIRA scaling guide that Atlassian put out, they pointed to custom fields as, let me see if I can say this correctly, the number one controllable aspect for your typical JIRA administrator that they can control to help mitigate performance impacts. Basically, of the things that a JIRA administrator can control, aside from things like hardware where they can increase memory, but things actually in the tool where if you just manage this better, your JIRA will perform better. Custom fields are pretty much at the top of the list now. And traditionally, it's always been custom fields and issues, but it seems like they've made some improvements to JIRA 6.4 and JIRA 7. That now custom fields are really number one as far as configuration elements that are causing problems in JIRA.
You're telling us that not getting JIRA, not customizing fields properly configuring them in a proper manner can impact the technical performance of your instance?
Yeah, part of it's configuration, but it largely just comes down to the number of fields that you have.
Oh.
So part of the chapter deals basically with making intelligent decisions about when you need a new custom field, talking about the different custom field varieties and things that you should do. And it even steps out of the tool saying things like you need backup from your management in controlling custom fields, because this is something that you have to do when you're administering this tool. And in my experience, if you don't have someone who's going to back you up on those issues, you're going to have a hard time enforcing those things. So governance, essentially.
Are you finding then that customers are some that don't maybe have this governance or are not thinking ahead, just start adding custom fields like it's Christmas and and don't think about tomorrow, and then performance is affected later? Is that what's happening?
Yes, yeah, very, very often. I would say in the vast majority of JIRA instances that I've ever seen, that was the rule.
Wow.
Before we got in there and started consulting. And, if it's a small JIRA instance, it's not going to be too much of a problem. But the thing with governance is the earlier you start, the better off you are. It's something that's difficult to do retroactively, right? If you're a very fast-growing software business, you're going to be much better off if you get your governance policies in place ahead of time, and you're not trying to pick up the pieces later.
You gotta have to in the next update. You're gonna have to add a governance chapter to prevent that.
Possibly,
because nobody wants to read that chapter, I imagine.
Yeah. No. I mean, managing custom fields is already an intimidating name for a chapter. Governance is. I think that's right out. We'll have to figure out a unique way to phrase that.
I just have a couple more questions, Mikey, but I'm learning a lot actually. But Atlassian is making a push to get JIRA, and they split it up in version 7. And what they're trying to do is get people, any kind of team using their tool set, because there's lots of applications that could be or use cases in JIRA, right? So, we have customers that are using JIRA, for example, for all kinds of use cases. In some cases, insurance companies are using it to track underwriting subscription renewals. It's unbelievable. So I imagine a team of insurance underwriters should probably see something different in JIRA than software developers. And is this where custom fields come in to play?
It's a big part of why JIRA has worked for different business processes. Atlassian really did a tremendous job of setting up how the tool works and making it extremely configurable. And I almost want to say that most of the rest of the world figured out that you can use JIRA for all sorts of things before Atlassian did. Atlassian's been talking about this like it's kind of a recent thing, but we've been seeing customers do it for ages, and it's always been a good fit. We've never resisted against it. It always seemed like an appropriate use of the tool. But it is very highly configurable. Custom fields definitely being part of what allows JIRA to work for alternate business teams. And yeah, I would definitely say that JIRA is more of a work facilitation tool. It was built for software development, but basically, if you have something to do and you want to keep track of it, then JIRA will work. And if you have data around those work items, then
I'm curious about how that leap happens, because it's not like insurance underwriters or baristas or HR managers or legal teams are talking to software developers saying, "Hey, what tool do you guys use to track your Git repository?" So how does that leap happen?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat like a virus. I think it starts out with a software team somewhere, and someone sees them using it, and they say, "Oh, I like what that does. Can you set that up for me?" And they say, maybe the guy's nice or the lady, and she says, sure. Or maybe they say, yeah, we'll make you an admin. That's usually what they do. So yeah, we'll make you an admin, and then they set up their processes, and it just spreads out from there, and it kind of has this exponential growth, because once you another business team starts using it, and it becomes more central to the business, then it becomes a buzzword at the company. Oh, it's in JIRA. Put it in JIRA. I'm tracking everything in JIRA now.
Right.
We've seen it grow to the point where it's just ubiquitous across the entire company.
Don't talk to me. Go put it in JIRA. Yeah. Don't call me. I'll call you. Is that the new? JIRA is the new don't call me. I'll call you. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, and it's the new email. JIRA is the new email, and a much better
That's probably a topic for another day. But I mean, I tell you, my use of JIRA, I communicate primarily through JIRA. I'm not sending too many emails around. I comment, and people get notified.
Yeah. Now, this blab, for example, is brought to you by JIRA.
It is. Did I send you a JIRA issue to schedule this? I don't think I did.
Yes.
Whoa.
That's how I knew it was happening.
Okay. Enough about me. Mikey, so a summit is coming up in a week and a half, I think. It's November 3rd is the first day of summit, the Tuesday. Are you going to be at summit?
I am.
And,
I am going to be there.
By then, will you have the book stitched into your shirt, or will you be carrying copies in your briefcase?
I don't know. Well, I'll have to check my schedule.
All right.
There's a chance.
I think you're coming by the office on Friday to sign a whole bunch of copies. So we're going to have, for those in the audience, we're going to have copies of the book at our booth at the summit. So if you're going to summit, I think you guys should come on by and say hi to Mikey and try to find Matt, and don't bother them too much, or I'll have to give you a Zendesk book instead. All right, Mikey. Do you have any closing thoughts, any last minute tips you want to give anyone who's talking about custom fields, without giving away the secret sauce in the chapter? Is there one tip aside from you tell me. Yeah,
I mean, just don't assume that they're simple just because on the surface they are. Yeah. And they have to be changed with caution is the thing. You can disrupt a lot of data if you don't know what you're doing. I think I say in the chapter somewhere that fields are where the data lives, and they should be treated with an accordant amount of care.
Yes, and I think there's, closing for the audience, there is a blog post on the topic of custom fields that you wrote. It's on the ServiceRocket blog. So for those of you watching, if you want to read up about that, it's slightly different than what's in the book, but if you type in Mikey Schott, ServiceRocket, custom field blog, it'll pop up on Google, and you can get a preview. And come by at Summit and find Mikey. I'll be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, very, very much so. I love talking about JIRA.
You're going to be doing that all day tomorrow at the training course in Boston. So, yeah.
It's true.
Mikey, thank you for joining us today and talking to us about your contribution to the book. So people out there, get the book, Practical JIRA Administration. It's in its 4th update. And have a good day. We'll see you guys at Summit. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Bill.
Have a great day.